Check, check, Pablo, ¿me escuchas? Check. One, two, three. Check, 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 check.
Check, 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 check. Check, 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 check. ¿Cómo es? Yeah, es un buzz. We don't hear anything when I speak.
Check, check, check. Check, check.
Check, check. microfono. 1, 2. Stay. More. Okay, now normally it come back to. It will come back and come back to like this. Now, and now it will come back to normal. Moment. Now it's okay. See? Okay, now it's okay.
Yes, yes.
Now I think if I speak in the microphone, it's going to be fine.
What is this audio?
Listen.
But smaller.
Listen. It's okay.
What happened?
This needs to be this level. If it's too low, it's buzz. Okay, you're ready to go.
You're the best, man.
Oh man. Okay, I leave you because now I'm done.
Yes. Thank you.
No, it's total.
Pablo, ¿puedes chequearlo ahora? Parece que se arregló el... Pablo, ¿puedes chequearlo ahora? Parece que se...
So does the people at the panel needs to wear the in the panel there? Do they have they okay? Okay. So yeah. So if you want to, he said it's okay. And yeah, but you might be able to listen. Oh, okay. Okay. Terminado. Hello.
Só avisar o pessoal que precisa pegar o fone aqui, tá? Pra quem for traduzir.
Inglês, né?
Isso, avisa em inglês.
Tá.
Pra quem.
Eu acho que a maioria vai. Acho que a gente vai tocar em inglês uma parte e quem fala em português.
Isso, eles vão ter a tradução.
Não tem tradução.
I'll give you a signal when we can start.
Okay, all right. So I'll be.
Okay, just to avoid
Just to have more space, but then now it's reconfigured, so doesn't matter. You can wait here. You can wait here. Se vocês quiserem, porque a gente pediu para sentar aqui, até estava lugar, né? Agora, se vocês quiserem sentar lá, no começo, depois vir para cá, vocês que sabem. Pode ficar aqui também, vocês sabem. Só, sem só. Hello. Okay, so I hope you're hearing me on the phone. Okay. Yep. Working. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for making time to be here with us today. So the panel aims to discuss a lot. Fine. Okay. Aims to discuss this connection between science and policy, science and decision. And we're gonna. We know we are facing great and unprecedented challenge for humanity. So everything that we're facing now and we foresee facing in the future are fairly new for humanity. And how are we going to deal with that? How science can help the decision makers on having or taking actions towards reducing the risk and reducing the impact. We know climate change is increasing, so it's the word that we're coming to. It's in ongoing movement word. So the increase of temperature keeps changing the way of how environment will operate, and certainly how society will deal with those systems. And the relevance and to face this, how we can connect. And I think COP it's a great example on that. How we can connect the information that is produced how science is developing and evolving, and how that gets into the process, how that helps to the decisions in different levels, being that at a government level, which we're going to discuss a lot today, but being that also at the private sector, in the civil society, how that interacts with all that. So with this, we had an effort through several institutions in Brazil to bring critical information that were produced by the IPCC, but also updating those information in a document that exactly aims on that. So where we're going, what we're facing, what is the current diagnostics, and how that's going to move forward. How that is impacting the natural system, how that's impacting society, how that's impacting specific communities, how that dialogues with justice, social justice, how that dialogues with social racism, how in fact this whole complex society, configuration of society, faces a new and great challenges. So with that, just looking at my notes here. So with that, I would start actually calling our panelists to come to the stage here, and we're starting to discuss. First, having a presentation of what document is about, what is, which is an available document to everyone, but what is this about, and how this dialogue with different initiatives in the globe. So, sorry, I'm not very organized here, but I can do it. Thank you very much, Marcio. So, to start off, I will call. Sorry, it's too many papers here. It lacks of an artist connection here with me. So. I'll call first Marcio Rojas, who is the General Coordinator of Climate Science at the Ministry of Science and Technology in Brazil, who is a biologist and a master degree in molecular biology, dealing with climate change nowadays, and works with science and technology and innovation manner with a focus on global climate change. So Marcio is responsible as coordinator of the climate branch or at the Brazilian Ministry of Science and Technology. I would also like to call Emily Nurse, which is head of the Net Zero of Climate Change Committee at the UK, the United Kingdom. She's been head of the Net Zero Climate Change Committee since January 24. Coming fresh to, to this challenge, she leads the Secretary Work Advice on emissions reduction targets and mitigation progress reporting, and also has been at the CC since 2021 with an great experience on the leader team on the carbon budgets. So, and also has an academic background on particle physics. Very important understanding, the critical elements of climate change at University College in London. Thank you very much, Emily. I'll keep going here. So next one is Ulf Jekyll. Thank you very much, Ulf. Ulf is head of the Division of European and International Adaptation to Climate Change. He's an economist with a PhD on environment economics. Really critical, not only at this COP, but also throughout the whole discussion on climate change. Since '94, at the Federal Ministry for the Environment and Nature Conservation, Building, Nuclear Safety and Consumer Protection in Germany. And since 22, the head of the Division of European International Policy and Adaptation to Climate Change. Thank you very much for being here with us. Next one, I'll call Flavia Martinelli. I'm going through the list here. Yeah. She's a climate change specialist at WWF Brazil. She's a biologist, and she joined the WWF team work with political incidents for adaptation national international level. building links between biodiversity conservation and climate change, and amplifying voices for local communities and indigenous people. And the last one, but not least, for sure, is Carolina Maciel, who is a nature analyst at Alana Institute. Carolina, it's a great pleasure, prazer ter você aqui com a gente. A Carolina, she's going to speak in Portuguese, and I think maybe Flavia as well. But we're going to have translation. And Carolina is a biologist, environmental manager, a researcher with childhood, environmental justice, racial justice, and public policies in Brazil. So an important element here is that this effort that Marcio is going to talk about was a partnership between the Ministry of Science and Technology, the Rede Clima, which is a Brazilian network for climate change research, WWF, and the Alana Institute as well. So it's the suite, sorry, the voice is going, but the suite of different institutions with different mandates, this is really, really central for a connection between the information generation and a climate change need for decisions. So I had a little bit more time, that's why I spent my year to talk about. So I'm going to first call Marcio Rojas, who is going to present us this study that was done, and then from that we're going to go for a round of questions to our panelists, so they express their thoughts and their knowledge on this matter. Thank you very much. Marcio, please. I thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I hope everyone is hearing me well. Okay, thank you very much for signing. Well, my name is Marcio Rojas. I work in the Ministry of Science and Technology in Brazil, and we are very happy and very thankful to WMO, World Meteorological Organization, and also IPCC for having the opportunity to share with you our effort. What we did recently was to launch a document that is called, in Portuguese, Mudança do Clima no Brasil, in English, Climate Change in Brazil. It is a thesis and also strategic perspectives for decisions in Brazil. In Brazil, we are starting a new administration right now, and we understood that it would be a great opportunity to have an update in this information and make it available to all the society in Brazil. So next slide, please. Thank you very much. The idea of the document is that have an update of this information, summarizes the impacts of climate change in Brazil, and also recommends the actions needed to manage these impacts more effectively. The first stage of the work was to access all the most important documents of the IPCC. So we studied the sixth assessment report, the synthesis report, special reports on 1.5, land use, oceans, and so on. And we extract from these documents informations important for our national context, for Brazil. And then, in the next phase of the work, we assessed national science, national researchers, national institutions, so that we have more information on Brazil and what was going on in Brazil specifically. And for this step, we worked very close with Rede Clima. Rede Clima in English is the climate that Ministry of Science and Technology created in 2007, so almost 20 years already working with us. It's kind of our scientific branch in the ministry. They are organized in 16 sub-networks, each sub-network dealing with a specific theme. So, for example, we have a human health sub-network that is coordinated by Fiocruz from the Ministry of Health. We have a sub-network for energy that is coordinated by COP from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. We have a sub-network for agriculture that is coordinated by Embrapa from the Ministry of Agriculture, and so on. So we have 16 sub-networks forming the national climate network. Next, please. And with the help of the Rede Clima, Next slide, please. We produced this document. The idea of the document, as Jean Meto already said, was first of all give some information on the science, the updated science for Brazil. The next step is to see what we can expect from the future and what we can do to deal with the challenge of climate change in Brazil. So very briefly, of course, this document is already available in our website. So very briefly, just to give you all the idea of the document is. Next one, I just want to show you that in the section that is dedicated to climate science. Next one, please. Thank you. Next one, please. Just to show you that we are incorporating this document graphs that you all already know because of the IPCC work. But I would like to register that this information is already available in Portuguese because when we have our spare time, of course, in Brazil, we have a lot of spare time, we kind of dedicate to translate the most important documents of the IPCC to Portuguese so that all the important information of the IPCC is already available for the Portuguese-speaking community, not only Brazil, but also Portugal, Angola, Mozambique, and so on. We have an international community of Portuguese-speaking countries, so this work is made available to all the countries that speak Portuguese. Next slide, please. Sorry. And just to see how we translate these documents and make all this information available to other countries that speak Portuguese. Next one, please. And next one, please. Great. And that is kind of the conclusion from the science right now. Mutable and cascading effects accelerate the risk to diversity, people's health and well-being. Well, as I mentioned before, no surprise at all. Next, please. What is already happening in Brazil? That is some information that we had to assess information from the national science, and we managed to work with the National Institute for Space Research. They did a study to see what was going on in Brazil for the last 60 years. And what we can see is that in Brazil, we already have areas that have 3 degrees hotter than 60 years later. So we understand that the average for the world is 1.1, 1.2, maybe 1.5 already hotter compared with the pre-industrial age. In Brazil, we already have areas that is showing the temperatures 3 degrees hotter in comparison with the pre-industrial age. And talking about precipitation, what we can see is that in the northeast region of Brazil, it is 30% less precipitation right now in comparison to the pre-industrial level. And in the south region of Brazil, 40% more rains, 40% more precipitation in comparison with the 60 years ago age. Next one, please. Amazon, of course, is one of the most concerns nowadays. What we have been seeing in the Amazon is extreme droughts and wildfires are becoming more common, impacting biodiversity and the forest's ability to absorb carbon. From the mitigation point of view, it is a huge concern. From the adaptation point of view, other huge concern, because what we can see is that at this moment we are seeing extreme drought, but for the last years, what we are seeing in the Amazon is that we have a year of extreme drought, and then the year follow of that, we have a year of extreme flood. So Amazon is seeing droughts, extreme droughts and extreme floods each year, and that is going on for the past 15 years. So it's a great concern of us. Of course, other biomes were also studied and assessed, our savanna, cerrado, and so on, but Amazon is one of the most concern that we have right now. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. Rising sea level, most of the Brazilian population lives very, very next to the sea. So rising sea levels are intensifying the process of erosion and flooding on the Brazilian coast, especially in the north and the northeast regions. Impacts on agriculture, droughts and floods are reducing crop yields and threatening food security, especially in the Northeast and in the Amazon. Impacts on health were also studied. Rising temperatures and extreme climate events are impacting human health, especially in vulnerable populations with increased diseases and vector-borne diseases. I'm so sorry. Thank you. Such as dengue and Zika and yellow fever and so on. So this is some of the impacts that we are facing right now. Other impacts that we are facing, next slide please. These are some of the examples of causes and magnitude of the impacts that we are dealing with in Brazil. I'm not going to go through it all, but I just want to highlight the third one, drought in the southern region that was happening in 2019 and 2020, resulted in agricultural losses estimated at 30.4 billion Brazilian reais. This is the same region that in this year was underwater. So the same region that is right now dealing with extreme flood in the past had to deal with extreme drought. So that is what we are facing in Brazil. Next slide, please. What can happen? This is what we are seeing right now, what we can expect to the future. Intensification of extreme climate events, and no surprise at all, this is happening all around the world, and that is what we are expecting for Brazil also. Droughts, floods, heat waves, and storms will become more frequent and intense, with devastating impacts in various regions of Brazil. Changes in biomes, point of the no return for the Amazon, deforestation, droughts and fires, altering the entire rainfall cycle in Brazil and in South America. Caatinga could suffer desertification. As a matter of fact, in Caatinga, in this northeastern region of Brazil, we are already seeing some dots of desertification starting the process in this biome. Sea level will continue rising, and this could flood the coastal areas, displacing millions of people and causing significant economic losses. That is what we may expect for the future if we keep doing the things the way we do right now. Water and food shortage. In our systems, water is strictly related to energy and also food naturally. So water and food shortage, the intensification of droughts and changes in rainfall regimes could lead to water and food shortage, and also energy problems, especially in the Northeast and in the Amazon. Mass migrations, increasing inequality. I believe you all know that we already have persistent situations like poverty, hunger, and so on. So besides dealing with these persistent situations, we also have to deal with the new layer of situation that is the climate change. So the impacts of climate change tend to disproportionately affect the poorest and most vulnerable populations, exacerbating social inequalities. That is why in the climate agenda in Brazil, we have to be very careful with the actions and have a special attention to poorest and most vulnerable populations. And in the final part of the document, we give some ideas of what needs to be done. Emissions, of course, needs to stop increasing by 2025. Ideally, it should have already been to stop, but Brazil last week submitted our very new NDC, and right now we have a goal also for 2035. But emissions needs to stop increasing. Stop deforestation, of course, promote forest restoration, and encourage the conservation of biomes. Ministry of Environment is already doing a great job on that. We have the National Institute of Space Research monitoring the deforestation and all these efforts, giving important scientific information so that government can act controlling and stopping deforestation. The scale up of adoption of sustainable agricultural practice such as low carbon agriculture, agroforestry systems, and so on. We have Ministry of Agriculture already investing in an updating of agriculture plan for the next years. invest in low carbon public transport such as electric buses, trains, encourage the use of bikes and so on. That is also an agenda for cities and city mobilization and so on, and we are engaging other actors in this agenda. Invest in adaptation. What happened in Rio Grande do Sul in the beginning of the year gave us a very good example of the cost of inaction. And nowadays, when we listen some comments on, well, investing in adaptation is very expensive, we can show the case of Rio Grande do Sul and show in a very concrete way that not investing in adaptation makes all the costs much more higher than investing in adaptation. But implementation of early warning systems for extreme climate events, construction of resilient infrastructures, development of adaptable agriculture practice, and well, we have a list of adaptation measures that should be adopted. It is important for Brazil. Strengthen climate governance, coordination between different levels, subnational governments, so states, municipalities, also having the participation of civil society, academia. This is very important to be incorporated in the decision-making process. And of course, promote climate justice. Climate policies must ensure that the benefits and costs of the transition to a low-carbon economy are distributed fairly because of the persistent situation that I have mentioned before. Each increase, this is one of the conclusions of the document, each increase in global warming is expected to intensify multiple dangers and risks in all regions of the globe, threatening people and of course in Brazil. Some of these impacts is more intense because of the area we are next to the tropics and so on. So we are expecting to deal with challenges even bigger than the average we'll have to deal in the future. And next slide, please. Sorry for that. Thank you. And in the final section, in the final section of the document, we have some information important to be incorporated in the decision-making process. Healthy ecosystems, resilient cities, food and water security, low carbon economy, fair society, all of this has to receive the attention of our governments and other organizations of the society. Next one, please. And just to conclude, let me say a huge thank you for Rede Clima, our climate network for research in Brazil, and also our partners in this, in the elaboration of this document, this initiative, WWF and Alana Institute, for helping and working with us for the last 2 years so that we can present this document right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Márcio. Se quiser sentar aqui, pode sentar. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Márcio. I was just mentioned that I'm already moderating this, but I didn't introduce myself, which is okay. All right. Not that I'm very well known at all, but it's just so I'm João Almeida. I'm with the Brazilian National Institute for Space Research and Rede Clima, and working with the ministry in several actions. I think one of the elements that were very key and interesting in this perspective is how a global figure, which is very important on the whole process of the IPCC, a graph, can be relevant at the local level, how we manage to translate that information. And so I think that was part of this document. A lot of what is being stated there, it's based, or basic what is stated there is basic on science. So science feed the process, and how science dialogue with the decision. Science is not the only solution for everything, but the decision has to come along. So another critical aspect of this is that we're moving throughout 2025 to a COP in Brazil, which will have a lot of the information from different countries on NDCs. How this is going to be achieved? What is the impact of this? How all this understanding and knowledge can help? Yeah, please feel free. Can help to move for us to move forward in critical discussions. So what we're going to do now, we're going to open with some questions for our panelists. And thanking again for their presence. You see that I'm not very organized here, but I will. So what we're going to do, we're going to switch the way that you were invited to come to the panel. And we're going to start with the Carolina Maciel, which is from Alana. And she's going to speak in Portuguese, so there is a translator, another device. Carolina, muito obrigado por estar aqui com a gente. Foi um trabalho muito importante feito com a Alana. A Alana tem uma conexão muito importante com crianças, enfim, com comunidades. Então, assim, como é que, na perspectiva do Instituto Alana, e na tua perspectiva em particular, como é que esse diálogo acontece? Como é que essa informação chega à comunidade? Como é que a informação chega às crianças, né? Como é que a gente consegue mobilizar, né, as crianças ou mobilizar a sociedade nesse nível que certamente já são mobilizadas, mas são sensibilizadas por um problema adicional, sem deixá-las desesperadas e sem esperança para o futuro, né? Como é que a Alana trata com isso? Como é que você vê isso, Carolina? Muito obrigado por estar aqui com a gente.
Muito obrigada, eu que agradeço pela oportunidade de estar aqui para discutir com vocês sobre uma temática tão importante e que de fato envolve nosso presente e vai envolver o nosso futuro e que a gente precisa começar agora de quem a gente é, de onde a gente está, para de fato esses diálogos terem ação e irem para o território, sair do território e ir para escalas maiores, nacionais, globais, enfim. Esse é um espaço muito importante para que a gente discuta isso, porque aqui eu estou vendo pessoas diversas, de diversas localidades e que certamente encontram uma forma em que o tema perpassa as suas vidas e as vidas das infâncias dos seus territórios. Então, olhando para esse documento, para esse relatório super importante e respondendo um pouco da sua pergunta, eu acredito que tudo começa pela linguagem, né? A primeira forma de quebrar a barreira das crianças acharem que aquilo ali não é para elas, não está as envolvendo de alguma forma, ou que não dialoga com o seu território, com as suas demandas, com as suas necessidades. A primeira forma da gente quebrar a barreira desse não é comigo é transformando a linguagem. Ela precisa ser acessível, ela precisa ser inclusiva, ela precisa olhar para as infâncias e considerá-las. Em cada item, em cada decisão, em cada discussão, elas precisam ter vez e voz nesses processos, né? Então, acho que esse é o primeiro caminho, né? Olhar para a linguagem, como a gente pode tornar essa linguagem mais acessível e como a gente pode escutar as crianças, né? A gente não pode ficar só falando. Se elas têm voz e elas têm vez, a gente precisa ter ouvidos para, de fato, escutá-las e entender quais são todas as suas necessidades, que são bem particulares, né? Quando a gente fala de infâncias, elas são vulneráveis pelo seu próprio processo de desenvolvimento humano, né? A sua imunidade está se formando, ela ainda está descobrindo o mundo está descobrindo a criança também. Então, por conta dessas fases de desenvolvimento, ela é considerada vulnerável e por conta dos processos históricos que as colocaram em diversos momentos como pessoas silenciadas e esquecidas e deixadas num cantinho, esses processos históricos as tornaram também vulnerabilizadas. Então, as crianças são vulneráveis e vulnerabilizadas. E quando a gente fala de crise climática e quando a gente fala do impacto da crise climática, muito mais, né? A gente está falando de um cenário onde 1 bilhão de crianças mundialmente está enfrentando riscos climáticos diversos. Quando a gente fala de Brasil, são 40 milhões de crianças enfrentando um ou mais riscos climáticos e ambientais. É uma realidade onde, de acordo com dados que a gente já tem disponíveis, 99% das crianças respiram ar poluído, com nível de poluição acima do que a OMS recomenda. São as crianças que fazem parte dos 25% dos deslocamentos climáticos mundialmente. Então, é uma realidade onde as crianças são muito impactadas e muito atingidas. Então, elas precisam fazer parte dessas discussões agora e das decisões também. É importante envolvê-los no processo de planejamento, de implementação, de monitoramento, de acesso a essas respostas, considerá-las, porque elas são 1/3 da população mundial. Então, dentro de cada discussão que a gente for fazer, dentro de cada projeto, de cada programa, de cada organização, é pensar como eu encaixo esse 1/3 da população aqui dentro, como eu chamo elas para conversa, como eu escuto essas crianças e como eu levo esses debates, essas demandas que elas trazem dos seus territórios, com dados que nós temos disponíveis, para esses processos de tomada de decisão, de formulação de política pública, que é um direito humano, né? Elas são os humanos do presente e serão os humanos do futuro que mais vão sentir esse impacto da crise climática, então elas precisam estar na mesa de discussão e decisão, né? Não é uma questão opcional, como dizem as crianças da delegação do Alano, Children for Nature Fellowship. Essa é uma questão de direito humano, elas estão aqui, elas querem ouvir, elas querem falar, então acho que olhar para a escuta, olhar para a linguagem e como a gente pode acessibilizar e transformar essas realidades a partir de escolas, por exemplo, né, que são o equipamento público mais bem distribuído pelas cidades, e como a gente pode levar uma educação baseada na natureza, por exemplo, para esses territórios, para essas escolas. A educação baseada na natureza é uma vertente das soluções baseadas na natureza e é uma ferramenta muito importante para a gente, de fato, construir essa adaptação, essa resiliência. E imaginar o futuro, né? Acho que a gente não pode perder de vista o esperançar, que é algo muito presente em diversas culturas, principalmente culturas indígenas e quilombolas, de povos afrodescendentes. O imaginário, o sonhar, que é muito presente em todas as crianças, é uma ferramenta importantíssima para a gente conseguir imaginar o futuro e construir novos cenários. E o relatório também traz isso. É muito importante que a gente leve não só para o lado poético, mas também como uma força para esperançar o futuro no presente. Obrigada.
Super obrigado, Carolina. Não preciso me ouvir, né? Olha, eu acho que tem alguns aspectos centrais nessa conversa, nessa fala da Carolina, que a gente vê claramente, que é desde a perspectiva de uma imagem que o Márcio traz, quem está nascendo agora, quem nasceu há 10 anos atrás, quem nasceu há 15 anos atrás, que clima que vai enfrentar. Acho que essa questão também de desigualdade em termos de diferentes comunidades, como é que a criança acessa a informação e a que ela está exposta, são elementos que também são centrais nesse aspecto de tomada de decisão, né? E buscando a inclusão de uma maneira bastante transversal, né? Então, muito obrigado, Carolina. A gente vai voltar para você com mais alguma pergunta. Você não está liberada ainda. A gente vai voltar. E eu queria chamar a Flávia, continua em português, você prefere? Português, vou continuar em português, chamar a Flávia para trazer a experiência de uma organização global que trata com a questão dessa interface da tomada de decisão de mudança climática da sociedade e de biodiversidade, que é um elemento central nesse contexto que a COP do clima às vezes deixa passar meio de lado, né? Então, um aspecto importante, né, nesse contexto e também associado como é que é a informação que é gerada por comunidades tradicionais, informação que é gerada por pessoas que estão no território, conhecendo o território profundamente, e que obviamente estão vulnerabilizadas por uma situação social, uma situação climática impactante, né? Como é que essa informação chega, né? Qual que é a experiência, na idade que você pode compartilhar com a gente, né? Sobre incorporar a voz das comunidades vulnerabilizadas, acho que como muito bem a Carolina falou, dentro do processo, né? Como é que é esse diálogo, como é que a gente traz isso e também como é que a ciência produzida. Essa é a segunda pergunta que eu vou fazer para você. Ela já achou que eu ia fazer duas de uma vez, mas não. Obrigado, viu, Flávia?
Obrigada. Primeiramente, boa tarde. Queria agradecer o convite, né, de participar do painel e agradecer a paciência do público também em ouvir a gente de uma forma traduzida, né? Apesar de eu falar inglês, eu me sinto mais confortável falando português. Então, essa é uma língua, o português brasileiro, né? Uma língua muito linda que vocês vão ouvir bastante ano que vem. Então, espero que vocês já vão se acostumando um pouquinho com o nosso brasileiro aí. Para mim é um prazer estar nesse painel também, no stand do IPCC, né? Eu acho que, inclusive, queria saudar meus amigos biólogos aqui no painel também, né? Como bióloga, é emocionante estar aqui também. A gente admira por tanto tempo, né, os cientistas que compõem o IPCC. E eu trabalhei e tenho trabalhado, né, com educação climática há muitos anos, então a gente referencia bastante, né, o IPCC. Então, para mim é uma honra estar aqui com vocês. E eu gosto muito de sempre trazer esse lugar mais de humildade mesmo, né, de onde a gente vem, e ocupar esse espaço, né, trazer minha voz. Eu sou de uma cidade relativamente pequena do Brasil, da costa brasileira, né, de Vitória. E quando eu comecei a trabalhar com mudanças climáticas, foi me preocupando com o fato de Vitória ser uma ilha, que provavelmente, né, no futuro pode ser muito impactada pelo nível do aumento do mar, aumento do nível do mar, e também pela biodiversidade local também, né, muito afetada pela poluição das grandes empresas, tudo que a gente vê do contexto brasileiro. Mas trazendo aqui para o painel, né, vou responder a pergunta do Jean, não se preocupa, não vou fugir do assunto. Eu até ia brincar que se eu estivesse falando inglês, provavelmente eu ia ser mais direta na resposta. Em português eu vou me alongar um pouquinho mais. Mas a gente no WWF tem trabalhado bastante com o apoio às organizações locais, né? Muitas vezes a gente prefere deixar o lugar de protagonista, né? Inclusive é muito raro a gente ocupar painéis assim como eu estou ocupando hoje. A gente gosta muito de abrir esses espaços para as organizações que a gente apoia localmente. Então vou trazer um caso recente, né, que eu pude liderar no WWF. A gente tem um programa chamado Vozes pela Ação Climática, Voices for Climate Action em inglês, com outros parceiros, né, Fundação Avina, IAB. E nesse programa a gente apoia as organizações da Amazônia, locais de juventude, lideradas por mulheres também, para elas aprenderem a ocupar esses espaços. Então a gente tem um treinamento de advocacy, né? A gente apoia financeiramente também para que elas estejam aqui na COP, em outros espaços políticos brasileiros também. E para que elas sejam ouvidas nesse espaço, né? Para que não seja necessário que o WWF ou nenhuma das organizações que estão liderando esse programa façam essa mediação, que elas ocupem esses espaços diretamente. Eu acho que isso é uma responsabilidade de todos nós que estamos em organizações grandes ou que pelo menos têm condições de financiar e apoiar essas organizações locais dos territórios, que no fim elas trazem com muito mais urgência as demandas, né? Quando a gente pensa em crise climática, eu posso até falar aqui da minha experiência, mas eu venho de uma classe média, eu sou uma pessoa branca no Brasil, né? Apesar de vocês podem olhar para mim e me considerar latina, né? Mas no Brasil eu sou uma pessoa branca com muitos privilégios e é muito diferente, né, de como eu vejo a urgência da crise climática e como as pessoas que são mais atingidas em seus territórios e no Brasil trazem isso e traduzem essas urgências para esses espaços políticos e que cobram políticas públicas, né? Então, nesse programa, eu estou acompanhando bastante adaptação a nível nacional. Só para contextualizar, o Brasil está em processo de elaboração do seu Plano Nacional de Adaptação. E eu tenho tido muito contato com o Ministério do Meio Ambiente para a gente poder incidir, né, sobre as pautas do WWF, enfim, biodiversidade, outras soluções baseadas na natureza, para entrar no Plano Nacional de Adaptação. E no meio dessa articulação, né, eu vi que era importante trazer essas organizações locais para esse contato também, né? Eu não queria que fosse somente a minha voz e as demandas do W chegando até o Plano Nacional de Adaptação. Então, durante um dos treinamentos que a gente fez de advocacy com as organizações, eu consegui articular uma reunião com essas organizações. Hoje tem mais de 40 organizações dentro do programa, né? E o Plano Nacional de Adaptação brasileiro, ele é dividido por setores. Então, tem um setor somente voltado para povos indígenas, tem um setor voltado para comunidades locais tradicionais, né? Tem um setor só para a periferia, por exemplo. Então, a gente dividiu as organizações também por setor e conectou com os respectivos ministérios do governo para que essas organizações pudessem trazer o que era importante para elas, que entrassem no Plano Nacional de Adaptação, para além das consultas que já estavam sendo feitas ou que iam ser feitas, né, proporcionadas pelo governo brasileiro online. A gente considera que fazer a consulta online é um dos caminhos para a participação social, mas a participação social mais efetiva é que as vozes sejam ouvidas presencialmente e que as consultas possam ser feitas de forma mais direta. Então, o WWF conseguiu proporcionar isso para essas organizações e foi um momento de muita... Eu vi que teve muito resultado, tanto para o governo brasileiro de ficar feliz em poder receber essas contribuições, as organizações locais também de entregarem suas demandas de uma forma sem mediadores, né, de uma forma mais direta. Então acho que esse é um caso, para mim ficou como exemplo assim de como a gente pode fazer as políticas e não fazer as políticas de forma sozinha, né, que as organizações que têm condições no Brasil precisam mediar também esse processo e abrir caminhos para as organizações locais pequenas que não têm esse espaço, né, não conseguem acessar esses espaços tão diretamente assim.
Flávia, muito obrigado, parabéns. Muito obrigado. Eu de novo. Eu acho que você trouxe um aspecto importante na questão de adaptação, que realmente é algo que nos está batendo a nossa porta, assim como a mudança climática, a necessidade da gente pensar como é que é a adaptação. Se a gente tiver um tempinho no final, o Márcio vai falar um pouco sobre esse universo todo do diálogo que o MCTI vem tendo também com o MMA no plano de adaptação. I'm started to moving into English now, and I think that several of the elements that you brought in terms of how, in fact, the different voices can dialogue at the government level to help on mapping the needs and influence the actions. So thank you very much. I'll come back to you with the other questions. But so I'm moving now because of the adaptation link. So I'll move to our friend Uf Joko. Thank you very much for being here with us. So it would be really, really interesting and important if you can give us how science you feel that contributes actually to the prioritization of adaptation actions by the German government or at the European level. How you see this connection and how that is important for effective actions. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. And you may ask yourself, why is this German guy here? But we are cooperating very closely with the Brazilian government on adaptation. And our country, the organization of our country is not that different, even if Brazil is a much bigger country. I'm happy to be here on that panel. Thank you very much for that. Yes, of course, science is it's very, very important for our public policy. It's a sort of also a justification. I mean, if you are not if you are not doing scientific research, how do you know what you have to do? How do you know what is more needed than anything else? And how do you know which product is a better one? Which product has the least carbon footprint, for example, when it comes to choice editing and then these kind of things? We are doing all that. Life cycle assessment has a big tradition. When I joined the ministry 30 years ago, already there, we had life cycle assessment for, I don't know, drink bottles, and we decided, okay, these cartons are quite good, but the cans are bad, so we put a deposit fee on them. So, and it was just pure science that we did that, and we were much criticized for that. But still, this legislation is still there. So, in the other, in some of the other fields, it's even more simple. It's even more simple to provide information. It's much more accepted. If science generates the information and we can spread the information and use the information to support adaptation plans, to support adaptation policy, to support our states or the communities with that, for example, the risk assessment. This is needed. We are doing that on a regular basis, and we support all parts of Germany with these kind of information, and we put a lot of efforts in that. For example, our ministry has for scientific institutions, agencies, and these agencies have 3 times the capacity than our ministry. So together these 4, and our federal agency Umweltbundesamt is older than the ministry is, and many of the first legislative things we had in place in Germany are coming from that agency, so coming from the scientific arm, and was not generated by the ministry. So there's a huge tradition, and we have to take good care of that, so that this also the scientific independence is still kept. Otherwise, we lose our the agency is losing their credibility, and we also as a ministry are losing our the credibility, because we are not basing our policy on more or less independent scientific findings. This is quite important, and that has to be kept. And so far, we did that. But you can see that there's also pressure on us. There are other studies, maybe not that independent, brought to us in special cases when it comes to choice editing, product A versus product B, and so on. So these kind of things are we have to take care of that all the time. So this is an important issue, and we have to maintain the science-based policy. Maybe I'll leave it for this at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think that's science is there for good and sometimes for bad, so we need to always be aware of that. And I think one really critical point is that the complexity of the actions that we need to take. Adaptation, it's a very complex movement in terms of very local oriented, but it needs to have very critical risk calculated to all what we're going to adapt it for, from the social to the environment to the physical part of the system. So, and part of that also is that we have to go along with reduction of emissions. So this has adaptation and mitigation have to go fairly along on the same lines. So I think now I would like to call Emily Nurse to actually, as head of the Net Zero at the Climate Change Committee in the UK, tell us a little bit of how CCC works in that perspective, and how the committee expressed the experience that resulted in effective outcome in the country society. So how that reflect, so how you worked on dialogue with the ministry or with the government to be able to have action on the ground. Thank you very much to be here with us.
Thank you very, very much for having me today. It's a real pleasure. Thank you. So I'll start with an introduction of the Climate Change Committee. So we have a Climate Change Act in the UK that came about in 2008. So it's quite old now. So I'll introduce it, and then I'll talk a bit about its successes, because I think it really has been a successful act. We've really driven progress. And what it is it's a I'm not the Act. What the Act is a legal framework for how the UK will reduce emissions. So it has within it the emissions reductions targets, and also there's an adaptation role in the Act as well. So within that we have we have the Climate Change Committee, and that's what I'm part of. And the Climate Change Committee provides independent advice to the UK government. on these targets and on adaptation, on climate change risk assessment, and we also assess progress every year, the UK government's progress on how they're going towards achieving these targets, whether they've achieved them so far, the past ones, and how they're doing towards future ones, and also how they're doing for adaptation goals. So this committee is made up of experts. The actual committee is made up of experts in the area. Our chair is actually sitting right here, Professor Piers Forster, who's an expert in climate science. So we have scientists, we have economists, we have business people. There are actual ex-politicians in the committee. So we get a real diverse area of expertise. And the committee, under the committee are the Secretariat, and that's where I work, and we are around 40 analysts, and we do our own research into this advice and also to assessing progress in the UK. So the Secretariat work to the committee, and then we give our advice to government and we assess their progress. So what is this advice in targets? Well, we advised on the net zero target for the UK by net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. That advice was accepted. We also have carbon budgets. These are 5-yearly caps on emissions. They're legally binding. So they're 5-yearly caps. They started in 2008, and every 5 years there's a maximum that the UK is legally allowed to emit. And that then goes down over time. And the idea is it's paving the path to get to net zero. And what it does is it has these shorter term targets in sight that are really limiting your total greenhouse gas emissions. And that gives you a path towards the end goal of net zero, which actually is quite a long way away, so we need to be able to get there in steps. But we advise on the level, so the Climate Change Committee advises on the level of that budget, so what should this cap be? And we do it 13 years in advance of the beginning of that period, so we're about to give our advice on the 7th carbon budget, which starts in 2038 and goes to 2042. And we do it this far in advance so that there's time to plan the policies. Some of these technologies we're talking about have long lead-up times, and we need to make sure the infrastructure's there, the planning is there in time to get to the emissions reduction. So we need to know where we're going. Within the Act, it explicitly says, and I've written it down to get the wording right, we have to take scientific knowledge about climate change into account, and also technology relevant to climate change. And there are other explicit things in there, but the point is that we really do use an evidence base when we're giving this advice. And I'll maybe talk about this a bit later, but it's really, for us, we're focusing on what's needed, given the scientific advice on climate change, but also what is deliverable. What can we actually achieve? Because there's no point in having targets that cannot be achieved. So we look at our maximum possible delivery, and that is based on evidence. And we also we don't have a role in it giving a legal role in giving advice on the NDC, a formal role, but we have been asked both times now to give advice on NDCs as well. I would say this has been really, really successful. We have a lot of dialogue with the decision makers and also with communities and also business people, industry. We talk a lot and we do a lot of engagement, get our evidence base, but we talk regularly with the decision makers to make sure they understand our process, and so when we're giving our advice, it can land as well as possible. I say it's been a real success. It's a strong, successful framework. We've had 3 carbon budgets so far that are in the past. They've all been achieved. So our targets have been achieved. We've advised on feasible but ambitious targets. We have more carbon budgets. We have 3 more that are set in law in the future. And as I said, we're about to advise on the next one. And we have our net zero target. And they are ambitious targets that the future ones particularly see rapid emissions reduction. And what we've actually seen in the UK is around a 50% reduction in our emissions since 1990. The Act came about in 2008, and the rate of emissions reduction has really increased since then. So I think this has been a really, really successful framework. Great dialogue with our decision makers, and so far our advice has been accepted and action has happened. So yeah, I'd say it's been a success.
Thank you very much, Emily. I think that Ulf brought very strongly this traditional on linking science and decision making in Germany and certainly in Europe in several aspects, and this success framework that Emily just talked about, how that's its effect in terms of transition and how we're moving to a different society. And certainly this also has to connect it to just development, has to connect it to the economy of the countries, to ethic in relation to other lives on Earth. So I think I would now, it's a new thing here, I would pass to Marcio for like 3.5 minutes to talk a little bit about, we talked about Plano Clima, and then we talk about adaptation there, net zero, and Brazil just launched its third NDC, and we are moving to COP30. So in 3.5 minutes, just say what are your impressions on the Brazilian movement in this perspective. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think I'll have 1 minute just to say very thank you for these two colleagues from Germany and UK over here. Okay, thank you. We are talking about the science and importance of science, and with Germany we have a scientific cooperation that is in the Amazon Tall Tower Observatory, Atoll Tower, and this is very important for us in Brazil. And with UK we have the Amazon FACE scientific cooperation, FACE for free air carbon enrichment, both dedicating the Amazon. So I could not lose this opportunity to say thank you very much in the name of the Brazilian government and the scientists in Brazil with this important cooperation. As Jean mentioned, we have already, last week, we submitted our third NDC, and I would like to quote a very objective part of this NDC. In preparing, communicating, and implementing its new NDC, Brazil reaffirms its commitment to the best available science, and so on. So that is what we are doing. Our NDC definitely took advantage of our science, and this was incorporated in the decision-making process for the new NDC. And that is the same situation for our national adaptation plan, for our national mitigation plan, the sectoral plans, and so on. So with the help of Rede Clima and Climate Network and other colleagues from the science, we are more than involved in helping Brazil go in a good direction. Thank you very much. 3.5 minutes, I believe.
You're faster than that, thank you. Very fast. So I think that we're gonna move all the way around. So I think I'd like to start with Emily again, just because we're in this movement of, commitments and all this perspective of how the dialogue with decision makers actually gets into the implementation. So a little bit of the perspective of the CCC, what do you think are the most challenges that are involved in this universe, in this arena? So are they, in which side are they? Are they side on the communication, the side on the acceptance of scientific data, are the robustness of the information? Where do you think are the major challenges that are faced in this context? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a good question. So I'd say, as I've been talking about the successes, and I think we have had successes, and another recent success that maybe we'll get to later is also the UK's NDC that was announced here, 81% reduction by 2035. Whoop! So yeah, great that Brazil and UK have both put forward great NDCs. But yeah, the challenges. So I've been thinking about this a bit recently. So we do certainly face challenges, and I think in particular when we're thinking about challenges in the face of trying to communicate science, and also just any evidence, any data that we're using, any evidence that we use to sort of drive our pathways and what our advice is. I think there are a few areas. I think one is misinformation. There are people out there who are purposefully putting out misinformation. Now, I have absolutely no problem with people disagreeing with our advice if they've got their own reasons. We may disagree, and it's really healthy to have debate about different choices. But when misinformation is out there, it really derails the debate, and we end up talking about things that we shouldn't be talking about. And unfortunately, it can get into the press, and it can really have a big problem. So this is a major challenge. So we know that we're basing it on data, and as far as we can. And I'll come to some other challenges in a moment with that. But if there are there are ill-intent people out there who are actually putting out wrong information. This can really cause problems. And what we need to do in that space is respond calmly with the evidence, because there will be evidence against it, and that's the best we can do in that area. And just to get our voices out there, it's important to make sure that we're talking to people, that we're talking to the press, the media, and telling them the side of our side of the story with the data. Another challenge is, of course, that we do sometimes have a lack of data, actually. There are some cases, and in our pathways, there are some, for example, that we really think are very clear. It's very clear that we need to decarbonise our electricity supply by ramping up renewables in the UK, for example, that we need to move to electric vehicles instead of fossil fuel, and to electric heat pumps instead of fossil fuel boilers. There are some cases where we actually don't have all the information that we need, and there is a bit of uncertainty in our pathways, especially when we're going out to 2050. And we, of course, use all the information there is about early emerging technologies, also about how people's behaviour might change. That can be quite challenging to project forward. And where there are uncertainties, I think this can be a challenge in communication, because you want to be honest about the fact that there are uncertainties and options, and that we need to be aware of those, and we need to track them and make sure that our pathways are robust against them. But also it can cause problems when you talk about uncertainties, and it can cause people to freeze and not want to act because they don't know exactly what to do. So we need to encourage, distinguish those. These are the very clear things. You just need to do it. These are the ones where there's options, but you also need to start doing it. It's too late to not do anything. And to try and communicate those can be challenging. There's another challenge is where, of course, decision makers have other things to consider that isn't just the evidence that we're giving them. It's what might be popular with the population, how much things cost, which we do give them information on, of course, and that is important, but they may have different considerations about that. And actually in the past what we've had is challenges in the other way, where they've wanted to, in the Scottish Government, they wanted to do a target that was actually more ambitious than our recommendation. Our recommendation for a 2030 target was based on what we thought was feasible but ambitious, but they wanted to go ahead of that, but and put that in law without actually demonstrating how it could be possible, and then now have withdrawn from that and had to take it out of the Act. So again, it's like you need to have the evidence behind it. It can't just be about what you aspire to do without the evidence behind it. So yeah, I think that are probably the main challenges that have come to my head.
That's that. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Emily. I think that opened a very interesting aspect on this conversation, which deals with misinformation and deals with how much. So, Ulf, if you could elaborate a bit, how much you consider at the management level, how misinformation can be harm in terms of the decision making, how to go around that in terms of the need for action, effectively, and how we deal with that. Uncertainty is a big issue, but uncertainty is not misinformation. Uncertainty is something that we have to deal with, especially on projection. But how you see this context on misinformation in the climate communication, for instance, in terms of management?
Yeah, in fact, this is really, as Emery already stated, this is really a problem we also face, that there's misinformation, and there is misinformation. And not only in general is climate change man-made or not, but also in detail. So what is causing climate change and so on and so forth. Of course, interest groups, stakeholders, with special interest, they are doing the information they are doing. And of course, it's needed that we have a clear evidence base and that we communicate that. The communication is an important issue. Quite often, scientific results are very hard to communicate. Try to communicate the outcome of a life cycle assessment. That will not really work. So you have to make it understandable. So you have to, in a way, translate it. Even if there is some not that sharpness anymore than we had in the scientific study, but it's needed. You have to do it. You have to communicate it, and then on this evidence, you have to base your arguments against misinformation. I mean, we are not. We can. We can identify misinformation from the government side, but when it comes to public opinion, when it comes to public discussion, then it's then we also get a problem, because we got pressure on us because of that misinformation, and we can just counter that by a clear evidence-based policies and results and communication. That's all we can do. We can't prevent others from doing these kind of things. This is yeah, you all know this is not possible. Sometimes elections are won by that. So yeah, it's difficult. We just can keep to our track that we do evidence-based policy.
Certainly, I think that's really a critical way of dealing with the information and how that flows. And it's interesting because we are in an IPCC environment here, and the IPCC reports are approved by governments, which is a very interesting science and decision-making process. But still, there's a whole universe around that actually bring other sort or other information and how the public feels with them. So I think that kind of bring us in a very interesting perspective to see how the local knowledge, how traditional population deals with this question, how the information coming from the word, the context that you experience, Flavia, and how that actually, how you see this information produced by local community, produced for vulnerabilize the community, vulnerabilizar, I don't know if that's the word. Maybe it is, or I just made it up, I don't know. But anyway, it is a fact. So how you see that in this perspective of the need for communication, need for action, need for specific transformation? Thank you. Oh, sorry, I did it in English, but that's fine, right? Yes.
Sim, tudo bem. Eu acho que ainda é um grande desafio como fazer essas vozes locais serem incorporadas dentro da ciência e das políticas públicas também. Acho que temos um longo caminho. Temos bons exemplos no Brasil, como o Plano Nacional de Adaptação de 2016. Teve um capítulo liderado, né, por pessoas indígenas que trouxeram conhecimento local para a adaptação. Mas ainda assim eu vejo que esses conhecimentos muitas vezes ficam muito setorizados, né? Eles não incorporam de forma geral a ciência ou as políticas públicas. E não precisaria ser assim, mas eu acho que a solução é extremamente complexa, porque é estrutural, na verdade, né? O racismo é estrutural, né? As instituições, para mudarem, é um longo processo, então para incluírem de verdade as vozes, é um processo complexo que precisa de muita vontade e liderança, né? E muitas vezes as lideranças atuais estão em locais de privilégio que não abrem espaço para outras vozes chegarem. Então, para isso é preciso mudar toda uma estrutura, né? É preciso mudar as lideranças, é preciso mudar os políticos, em quem a gente vota. Eu acho que isso é uma reflexão que eu estava fazendo antes do painel, né? Como fazer com que as vozes locais cheguem nas políticas públicas. E, às vezes, para a gente fazer isso acontecer, a gente precisa melhorar o jeito que a gente vota, né? Quem a gente elege para essas posições de poder. Então, ainda temos políticos, né, que não representam a população, aqui falando especialmente do Brasil, né? Muitos parlamentares não representam seus eleitores e por isso muitas vezes não estão preocupados também em ampliar essas vozes do território para dentro de suas políticas. E eu acho que a mesma coisa na ciência, né? Se a gente não tiver políticas de inclusão também, a gente não avança também nessa pauta. E eu acho, especialmente trazendo a responsabilidade para nós cientistas, né? Porque eu também me considero cientista. Eu acho que a gente tem ainda uma arrogância um pouco acadêmica, né? A nossa linguagem a gente gosta que seja muito difícil, muito técnica, né? A gente não tem uma preocupação em traduzir essa linguagem científica para uma linguagem mais acessível, seja para as crianças, né? Como a Alana tem feito. O WWF também faz isso por meio da revistinha do Chico Bento, que é um quadrinho muito famoso no Brasil, que é lido por muitas crianças, né? Eu lia na minha infância, há 20 anos atrás, e as crianças ainda hoje leem, então é uma revistinha que chega a muitas crianças. A gente traz mudanças climáticas para essa linguagem também, por meio dessa parceria com Maurício de Souza Produções. E a mesma coisa a gente tem que tentar fazer para os outros setores sociais, né? Então, as comunidades locais, como que a gente fala para um pescador, né, como ele vai lidar com as mudanças climáticas daqui para frente, né, com o aquecimento dos mares, como que a gente traduz isso para ele se adaptar a essa nova realidade, como que a gente acessa a vivência dele, o que ele já está sofrendo ali na ponta, para poder fazer as políticas mudarem. E eu acho que as políticas não tem que ser só ambientais, né, as políticas precisam ser sociais, porque quem está lá na ponta sofrendo, né, são pessoas que realmente estão invisibilizadas nesse processo, pela ciência e por espaços como esse que a gente está hoje, né. Vou fazer uma mini reflexão aqui sobre os processos de negociação da COP. É feito todo em inglês e a gente vê que os negociadores dos países que não falam inglês sofrem um pouco no processo, tanto para entender o que está acontecendo quanto para se posicionar. Então, isso acho que é uma grande retrato de como isso acontece em todos os outros espaços, né? São espaços ainda muito excludentes que precisa de melhorar. Esse processo precisa melhorar, os espaços precisam melhorar. E se cada um de nós aqui que tem o privilégio de fazer essa mudança acontecer não se movimentar, esse processo vai demorar muito mais. Então, acho que esse é meu chamado para a gente transformar essa realidade também.
Legal, Flávia, muito obrigado. Eu acho que tem alguns elementos centrais nessa, que é como é que a gente faz com que todas as vozes possam ser ouvidas, né? Como é que isso se expressa na comunicação, seja da linguagem, seja de outras expressões. E um elemento central é que as soluções são muito locais, quer dizer, quem está no território é que vai não só agir, como sofrer um impacto eventual daquela coisa. Aí a gente, meio que desse contexto todo, traz para o universo infantil, né? Como é que são as crianças que vão estar daqui a 50, 60, 70 anos aqui, né? E que muito do que a gente faz reflete na vida não só da criança, mas como do adulto que hoje é criança. Carol, como é que você vê isso, essa questão toda de comunicação, esse elemento, esse aspecto todo, né? Você já tratou um pouco isso dessa relação, né, com as crianças, né? Mas como é que a Alana trabalha com isso? Como é que você vê a distinção em diferentes estratos expressos em ações efetivas? Obrigado, viu?
Perfeito. O Alana trabalha a partir da ótica de justiça climática com essas infâncias, né? E é bom a gente falar infâncias no plural porque são muitas, são diversas. Então, infâncias, crianças e o quanto a gente já percebeu por diversos dados que foram apresentados em diversas falas também, que esse impacto da crise climática, ele não é distribuído de forma igualitária pelos territórios, né? A gente consegue fazer recortes de pessoas mais impactadas com uma intensidade maior ou com uma frequência maior, como no caso das crianças. Então é importante a gente olhar a partir da lente da justiça climática, que é o que a Alana traz, quando ele fala de desenvolvimento integral das infâncias, inclusive o direito ao território, o direito ao meio ambiente ecologicamente saudável, equilibrado, como a gente tem no nosso artigo 225 na Constituição brasileira, né? Então é muito importante que a gente pense a comunicação olhando para o fato de que não existe justiça climática sem justiça racial, social e intergeracional. porque exatamente são essas crianças que hoje já estão sofrendo e ao mesmo tempo já estão pensando em como ser agentes de mudança, mas daqui a 10, 15, 20 anos estarão também com muito mais força, com muito mais voz, pautando muito mais as suas necessidades, as suas oportunidades que enxergam nesse espaço, seja nas NDCs, seja em todas as outras negociações, né? Então, é interessante que a gente pense a comunicação integrando a criança nesse processo. O Alana tem o Marco Legal Criança e Natureza, que é um projeto de lei que fala exatamente sobre a importância da criança na natureza e da natureza na vida da criança, já que ambas estão interligadas, ambas são as mesmas coisas, nós somos natureza também. Em algum momento a gente se perdeu disso por processos históricos diversos, mas o Marco Legal Criança e Natureza eu acredito que seja um exemplo muito bom de como esse processo deve ser feito, né? Com uma escuta completamente diversa, inclusiva e longa, porque precisa ser longa, precisa ser demorada, é um processo para ser democrático e que a gente tem que entrar ali no tempo das crianças, né? A gente às vezes está num tempo corrido e num outro momento e a gente precisa voltar para esse imaginário, para esse sonhar, para esse olhar micro que muitas vezes é necessário para que a gente consiga também olhar para o macro. Então, é um trabalho de formiguinha, ao mesmo tempo que é um trabalho muito potente, porque essas vozes estão aqui, essas vozes existem, e a gente só precisa dar ouvido a elas.
Maravilha, muito obrigado. Eu acho que com essa frase do tempo das crianças, né? Eu acho que a gente pode... Primeiro eu queria agradecer, essa sessão também está sendo transmitida online e agradecer as pessoas que estão nos vendo online. Não sei se eu fico no português, se eu mudo para o inglês, eu estou uma confusão. Muda para inglês, okay. So I'll switch to English. So thank you very much. I'd like to thank also people that are online, this being for broadcast online too. And we do have, I think we will grant for a few more minutes to get some question or some other impressions. So is there any question from the audience for our panelists, some impressions, information, or perceptions or questions itself? No questions? Just one? Please, Jota.
Oh, I'll ask in English, perhaps. Well, I'm JP Amaral. I'm head of nature also at Alana. So thank you for this panel and thank you for the partnership as well with the ministry, with Rede Clima, with WWF. And thank you for being here to discuss this with us. Well, question mainly on the debate that is happening around nature and climate here, right? And even the perspective of Brazil having this agenda quite strong from COP16 on biodiversity that just happened to COP29 now and heading to COP30. So I was thinking, how can we better bridge the science and the policy from those two issues together, and how can we connect actually the biologists with the climate scientists for better cohesion and policy coherence of these two COPs for COP30. So basically, how can we do what children do best, which is understand nature and climate together as one, but we still don't know.
Thanks, JP. Children know where to swim, don't matter what the weather or the water in that context. So, we have a few minutes. Who would like to reply to? Okay, sure, yes, please. So we're gonna do a round of response. Thank you.
Só rapidinho. Porque essa é uma pauta que o WWF também tem puxado aqui na COP de clima e também na COP de biodiversidade. A gente está presente nas duas, tentando fazer essa ponte entre clima e natureza. Acho que a primeira pensamento que vem é assim, gente, por que deixamos essas pautas se separarem? Porque estão extremamente conectadas, né? Não tem como falar de uma coisa e não falar da outra. Eu acho que a gente acabou se perdendo um pouco no meio do processo político mesmo, de como financiar, como tomar medidas, né? Mas que elas estão extremamente conectadas. Então, eu não tenho uma resposta assim de como fazer isso diretamente, mas eu acho que é uma expectativa que esses processos ao longo do tempo se juntem em algum momento. e a gente consiga pelo menos que em ambas as decisões das COP seja citada, né, como que a gente vai daqui para frente incluir essas pautas e também medir, fazer isso de uma forma que a gente consiga medir a implementação de ambas políticas, tanto para a conservação da biodiversidade, proteção da natureza, quanto para clima. Então, para não ser processos tão separados. A COP de Cali mencionou a COP Clima, né? E a gente queria muito que a COP Clima também fizesse menção a essa outra agenda, para que esse seja o início de uma junção maior das duas pautas. Então, o WWF tem muita expectativa que isso aconteça. Estamos trabalhando com o governo brasileiro para que, de repente, na COP em Belém, a gente consiga uma força maior dessa agenda de natureza e biodiversidade na COP 30.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think here there is a sort of start on bringing these communities, these cosmoses together, and this is very good. And if we look in our field of adaptation, of course, ecosystem-based adaptation is the approach we are favoring, we are promoting with all of our projects. It's as simple as using nature for climate purposes, and this usually works quite well. And it also turns out that these kind of measures work very well with the communities, with the local people. People are more used to that than to technical whatever measures. Quite often it's also cost effective, more cost effective than other measures, and but it has to be known. It has to be known. There's this network of friends of the ecosystem-based adaptation. There's a fund we are financing on projects organized by IUCN. So there are first steps done, and we want to promote that, and we also want to promote that when it comes to the outcome here, or the outcome at the General Assembly, or others, so that ecosystem-based adaptation should be the first choice. And of course, it's not working in each and every problem area, but most of the areas it's working, and you should think of it first. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Instead of giving you a solution, I'm going to bring up another problem, which is actually the integration within climate change. So mitigation and adaptation integrating together is not always thought through. So sometimes you've got a long-term plan for how to decarbonize your country, and you need to make sure that the infrastructure that you're building is going to be resilient to future climate change, and that doesn't actually always happen. And we're starting to do that a lot more at the Climate Change Committee. We have an adaptation committee that's separate to our mitigation one, but we're starting to integrate teams within the Secretariat to make sure when we're thinking of solutions in buildings, for example, that we're thinking about when they're going to get hotter, or in our infrastructure, we're thinking about where there may be floods or droughts or extremes in weather, and so that's also something that needs to be integrated. So it's not a solution, but all these things need to be considered together.
Não vale muito, né, gente? Eu e o JP estamos juntos todos os dias, estávamos juntos na COP16, estamos juntos aqui, mas acho que é isso, é uma pauta que está cada vez mais se aproximando uma da outra, né, porque na vida real a gente consegue identificar que está tudo muito interligado. Em algum momento isso deve ter feito sentido de separar as duas copos. Eu lavo louças separando os pratos dos copos primeiro para me organizar, mas depois eu junto tudo num lugar só, porque na vida real eu como com garfo, eu tenho prato, eu tenho copo. Então acho que a gente está cada vez mais, organizamos as louças, agora a gente vai organizar certinho aqui com tudo, mas em algum momento isso se mistura. Eu acho que a gente está chegando nesse ponto de urgência de tratar as duas pautas, e as crianças já sabem que as duas pautas estão interligadas, as crianças já sabem que clima e biodiversidade é a natureza e que a gente precisa levar as duas questões a sério, de forma colaborativa. Então vamos aprender com as crianças também, né, nesse lugar.
Obrigado, Carol, Carolina. Super legal. So definitely a message that we need to reconnect to nature for sure, for several aspects. And I think I think we're at the dawn of our session. So I would really like to thank a lot our panelists. If we could give another round of applause. Thank you very much. Thanks for all your thoughts and insightful information. Thanks for everyone for being with us until now. And let's aim for a wonderful end of this COP and a great COP next year in Brazil. So hope to see you everyone there. Bye-bye. Pela participar, ser tão legal assim.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure.
It was a wonderful pleasure. Thank you very much. I hope to see each other again. I hope so. Oh, obrigado. Legal que você veio aí. Claro. Oh, okay. Yeah, wonderful. Yes. Thanks a lot for making time for this. That was wonderful.
No. That's also a bit of a hard issue that science should be kept into account. Even internally, it's not always given. So.
But we need to keep the whole.
Yeah. We have to push for that. That's why I did it.
That's wonderful.
I would mention that being in Brazil, you gotta go to see the things.
I went a long time ago when I was a child. I went to.
No, but now we have all the rings.
Yeah.
They're creams.
Yeah.
No, I really
can go.
Yes, indeed.
Foi o jeito dela de